Today on Inspired Money.
And I had a friend who was at the Journal, Melanie Trotman, who gingerly, lovingly said, well, Lynnette, as I was like complaining, saying, this is not right, and blah, blah, blah. And people were telling me, oh, you should sue and all this other stuff. And no, I was like, no, I'm not going to go there and do all that. But Melanie said, oh, didn't you tell me before that, kind of in the back of your mind, you always wanted to be an entrepreneur anyway? And then I was like, yeah, but not like this. I wanted to do it on my own terms, in my own way, and at my own time and schedule.
This is episode 6 with the Money Coach, Lynnette Khalfani-Cox. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Lynnette Khalfani-Cox is the Money Coach. She's a personal finance expert, television and radio personality, and the author of numerous books, including the New York Times bestseller, Zero Debt, The Ultimate Guide to Financial Freedom. Lynnette herself once had $100,000 in credit card debt before paying it all off in 3 years and turning her financial life around. You might recognize her from appearances on The Oprah Winfrey Show, Dr. Phil, The Tyra Banks Show, and Good Morning America, among others, sharing her success story and teaching millions about proper money management and how to get out of debt. In our conversation today, I want to focus on her transformation from award-winning reporter for CNBC to taking the entrepreneurial leap to becoming a financial educator. She's her own boss and has built a hugely successful personal brand. We'll talk a lot of great stuff, but in this episode you'll learn how her father's passionate, independent spirit and feelings about entrepreneurship definitely shaped her. What event pushed Lynnette down the entrepreneurial path? What Lynnette and her sisters mean by the phrase, one monkey, don't stop, no show. How asking the right questions and having a willingness to always be learning can take you far. And I'll explore with the money coach herself, is money important? Oh, and a quick side note. At one point, we got really serious talking about the big security breach at Equifax. I decided to break that out into its own separate bonus episode, so please check that out. It's super important for you to protect your personal information. I'm so excited to have Lynnette on the show today. Now let's get inspired with Lynnette Khalfani-Cox. Well, Lynnette, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to join you.
Let's just jump right in. The first question that I like to start with is, what's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Well, I don't want to scare your audience, but mine is kind of a horrible first memory of money. It really dates back to me constantly hearing my parents argue about money. So I was born in New York City. My parents moved to L.A. when I was like 2 years old, and my parents had 5 daughters together. All of us were pretty much, stair steps, as we called it, 1 and 2 years apart. So when I was around 5 years of age or so, I very distinctly, recall my parents constantly arguing about a lack of money, what to do with the money, whether or not my father had earned enough money. And my dad was actually a shoeshine man from Harlem.
Wow.
His dad had been a shoeshine man, and his father was a shoeshine man, believe it or not. So our family had moved to L.A. because my father wanted to pursue a different career and become, of all things, an actor. So he, took the family out there ultimately. An uncle helped us really to move out there. But because he had sort of one toe in Hollywood in terms of movies and commercials and theater, and then another big foot, let's say, in the world of shoe shine business, because that's what he knew and had grown up with, etc. I remember my mother saying, "Michael, why are you out there trying to shine shoes and, working at a shoe shine stand?
Mm-hmm.
You have 5 girls to feed. You have to get a real job," and stuff like that. And she once told him, "You know everything there is to know about shoes. Go get a job at Floor Shine, the shoe store." She said, "You'll be the manager." And sure enough, he did. He went to Floor Shine, probably just to get her off his back. And he became the manager, but he hated it. He felt, like I guess people today who are in a cubicle who feel constrained and trapped, and he ultimately quit, because he liked the freedom of being an entrepreneur. And so it actually worked out quite well for him, in addition to doing much more high-profile entertainment work and commercials and, little spots in TV and movies and stuff like that. He wound up as an entrepreneur owning many, many different shoe shine stands and hotels and in car washes and all of that. But yeah, it was rough going there for a while.
Wow,
and
that's fascinating.
My parents, they divorced when I was 7 years old. And a huge part of that breakup was, related to financial stress. And so it's kind of one of the reasons that I do what I do today as a money coach, because I recognize the links between, money matters and how it impacts every aspect of your life, including your relationships, of course.
Yeah, super interesting. It sounds like that did shape you in many ways, because one is the subject of money, but two, you ended up on TV too.
Yeah, not only that, but when I think about ending up as an entrepreneur, it's kind of crazy because I had such a wild upbringing, in the sense that in Los Angeles, I grew up during the era of busing. And so in the late 70s and then early 80s, most minority students in the central part of Los Angeles, primarily African-American students and Latino students, we got bused and sent out to the western areas, suburbs and other places, into very, predominantly white, very wealthy areas. So, I went to Paul Revere Junior High School in Brentwood, and Canyon Elementary School in Brentwood, and Pacific Palisades High School. And because of that, I sort of saw two worlds. I saw what, the typical family was doing in the central Los Angeles neighborhood where I lived, where I had an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment. So, after my parents, as I said, they divorced, my whole life we lived in apartments. My mother in one bedroom, and then 5 girls in the other bedroom, where there were like 2 sets of bunk beds. So my sister Cheryl was on the top bunk bed. My sister Debbie was on the bottom bunk bed there. And then on the second set of bunk beds, my sister Denise on the top. And then on the bottom bunk bed, me and my younger sister Hope. So imagine 5 girls in a room, And, but I had friends, again, mostly my white, wealthier friends, who would say, "Oh, come to we're having a pool party at my house," or, "Can you come hang out after school," or whatever. And, honestly, I try not to be so, to idealize and to make it so romanticized about the sort of upbringing that I had. But there was really true diversity in the classrooms and in our sort of interactions, because I was never like the only one, the only African-American kid in the class, which is frankly like what my kids have to go through now. I live in an area that's predominantly white, and they're, just almost constantly, like maybe one kid, if that, in the school, or 2 or 3, black kids, that kind of thing.
Right.
But long story short, it really felt like 25% black, 25% white, 25% Asian, 25% Latino. And it was like so cool. But when my wealthier friends would invite me to come over or say, "Oh, hey, meet my parents," it was common for them to say, "Oh, my dad's a doctor," or my mom's an engineer, or my mom is a teacher. What does your dad do? Mm-hmm. And at first I was like, I was ashamed, and I didn't want to say, "Oh, he's a shoe shine man,"
right?
Because I was like, "Oh, that doesn't sound too good." I would say, "Oh, he's an actor," He's been in E.T., which he really was, the movie E.T.
Totally cool.
So, and my mom she had many different jobs. She was a secretary, she was a cashier, but neither of my parents went to college. My sisters and I were first generation, mm-hmm. But my father's really strong, passionate, independent spirit and his feelings about entrepreneurship definitely shaped me, unknown to me, obviously, at the time, because I just thought, oh, my gosh, this is like a horrible thing. But later, when I went through a downsizing, because I was a Wall Street Journal reporter for CNBC, and when I left CNBC, kind of unceremoniously back in 2003, and I started my company, mm-hmm. TheMoneyCoach.net LLC.
Can we take a step back for a second? As a kid growing up, you had this really diverse experience going to school, and there was a contrast between where you lived and then the neighborhood where your school was. When and how did money become your favorite subject to geek out on? Because you did end up going to college and you studied journalism. Where did money come into your perspective?
Well, I mean, when I really reflect on it and think back, there were so many sort of signal posts along the way, so many kind of, really highlights that, again, only, in retrospect that I go, oh, yeah, I kind of was like that. I did, But, like, I remember when I was at Paul Revere Junior High School, and, again, the kids had money. The kids in my neighborhood didn't have money, but I would go to a liquor store in my neighborhood, in my local neighborhood, and I would buy these candies called Now and Laters and candy sticks. Mm-hmm. You might be too young and you might not know what I'm talking about, but
I'm only a few years behind you, I think. Not that far behind, but I don't think I ate Now and Laters.
And there were like apple sticks, these hard kind of candies, and then strawberry or cherry. So unbeknownst to me, I didn't know I was like totally doing a Wall Street move and pulling an arb play, arbitrage play. But I would buy the candies for 10 cents, and then I would go to school and sell them to the kids for like 25 cents. Mm-hmm. And it was only because I had bought, some before, and some kids had said, oh, wow, let me have that. And I was like, no, this is the only ones I had. And they're like, please, I'll give you a quarter for it, And so I was like, oh, okay. And I'm knowing in my head, I only spent 10 cents for it. So soon I was like, getting money from this. And I would go and spend like $10 worth on candy sticks and Now and Laters, and then take it to school, literally sell out in one day, and come back home with $25.
Yeah, entrepreneurialism was in your blood.
Totally. So things like that along the way, but honestly, I didn't it was sort of there, I guess, but it didn't really bubble up to the surface until I went through a firing, until I was downsized. And I was, I had been at Dow Jones for a decade.
Right.
I loved my job. I had great colleagues, and I, did wonderful work, won awards, and it was very good. I was very well paid, six-figure salary, everything was very nice.
You were the Wall Street Journal correspondent at CNBC, right?
Correct. It was, folks like Becky Quick and Carl Quintanilla. Mm-hmm. We were among the first crop of people who Dow Jones brought over to the TV side, and that was at the time when Dow Jones, then the parent company of the Wall Street Journal, before Fox and Murdoch and all that came in, but they had a partnership with CNBC. So they took, newspaper and print talent and then put us over on the TV side to really translate stories for a TV audience. They said, oh, you guys are great storytellers. You know the markets well. I had covered Wall Street, so I had covered the brokerage business and written a lot about corporate finance and investment banking and all that good stuff. So, but one day my boss came to me and, 200 other people too, and pretty much said, sorry, we cannot afford you guys anymore. You have to go.
So that came as a big surprise?
total stunner. Now, this was one of the early waves of downsizing in the media, advertising industry. Advertising revenues were down and all that good stuff. And so I was like, wait, I thought I had a contract. I thought I've been such a great employee. This is not fair. This is not right. So I kind of pouted and, I had my own little pity party for a moment there.
Yeah. What emotions ran through you on that day?
I was totally pissed. I was like really upset and frustrated. I was angry. I was hurt, I'm sure I cried at home, and I was very upset. I will not lie. And but in short order, I resolved to get right back in the fight. And my sisters and I, we've always had an expression that we say to kind of prop each other up, and it's one monkey don't stop no show. And it's just kind of a slang, but a little expression that really just means, one problem, one setback, one challenge, one hurdle is not going to stop me. If there's a problem, I'll go through it. I'll go around it. I'll go under it. I'll fight my way, whatever.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great way to approach life and business and whatever you're working on. Unfortunately, I think that the downsizing, it's becoming more and more a common occurrence for many American employees. And I always hear people say that it's an opportunity to become better or become bitter. And it sounds like your bitter was really short-lived, and then you moved on to become better.
My bitter, as you put it, and that's a great saying there, because I think there's a tremendous amount of truth in that. You can become bitter or you can become better. My bitter was extremely short-lived in the sense that my last day on air at CNBC was March 1st, 2003. That very same month, March 2003, I started my own company, and I have never looked back. So, yeah, that pity party and that anger and frustration was, might have been a couple of weeks at most, if, 10 days, or I don't know exactly, but I got right to the business of starting my own company, and it's worked out phenomenally well. So
yeah, that's amazing.
I'm super happy about that.
It's amazing that you formed the company so quickly. You didn't go sending your resume out trying to get another network job.
Not at all.
How is it that you decided to make that change and really transform yourself from being a daily correspondent on TV to becoming the money coach?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. There were some things in the works already. So at the time, I was in the middle of writing my first book called Investing Success. And Charles Schwab, I got to write the foreword of the book for me. And, obviously I knew him through Wall Street Journal, CNBC. And I had a new schedule with CNBC where Monday through Thursday, I was, obviously reporting on air, working, full time there. But Fridays, I had negotiated the right to take off so that on Fridays I could just write and focus on writing my book. And so amid the downsizing that ultimately came, it pushed me into entrepreneurship, obviously, but it also did make me see I can finally finish this book now because I can have focused, dedicated effort and time and energy and mental, acuity and just sort of really hone in. And I had a friend who was at the Journal, Melanie Trotman, who gingerly, lovingly said, well, Lynnette, as I was complaining, saying, this is not right, and blah, blah, blah. And people were telling me, oh, you should sue and all this other stuff. And no, I was like, no, I'm not going to go there and do all that. But Melanie said, oh, didn't you tell me before that, kind of in the back of your mind, you always wanted to be an entrepreneur anyway? And then I was like, yeah, but not like this. I wanted to do it on my own terms, in my own way, and at my own time and schedule.
Right.
So, but she was right, and I was like, okay. When I kind of mellowed out, I was like, well, maybe I should really think about maybe this is an opportunity here. Maybe this is a chance for me to get better. So I just took it and ran with it, and I didn't know at the time. I didn't, immediately .com, themoneycoach.net, and,
Right.
but I did know that I wanted to position myself as a financial educator, and I wanted to, frankly, keep doing a lot of what I had been doing. I wanted to write a lot. I wanted to be on TV. I wanted to interview people, and I literally do all of that right now still, and a lot of it is now I'm on the other side as well, obviously getting interviewed as an expert and all that.
Right. I mean, the financial subject matter is very similar between the two, being a daily correspondent and then transforming into an educator. But did that change in role require a change in mindset too, or is it not really that drastic a change?
On many levels, it did require some changes, but there were some common ground, some areas of commonality. So, for example, I think in general, the people who are sort of like the most successful at whatever it is that they do are just naturally curious people who have an interest in others, an interest in the world around them. And of course, by definition, journalists have to ask a lot of questions, right? So
Right.
When I was working for Dow Jones, and I worked for Dow Jones News Service, the News Wire, and for the Journal, and obviously for CNBC, literally my title was Wall Street Journal reporter for CNBC, I got a chance to interview some of the best and brightest minds on Wall Street. So I was constantly interviewing stockbrokers and traders and certified financial planners and analysts and money managers, and I would always ask them what they were doing for their clients, what was working, what wasn't, what were the mistakes people were making, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so after a while, I started saying, oh, wait a minute, this isn't rocket science. You know what? I could do this too. I could learn this and I could successfully invest. I could manage my finances better, and I was a hot mess,
Right.
by the way, of course. So, but I did start thinking oh, okay, this isn't like totally, you're speaking another language to me here. Some people say Wall Streetese, I don't know, but I really did think I can master this. I can really get to know this very well. And so I started to do just that. And in terms of the journalism side, my master's degree was in journalism and all that. But, my first job out of graduate school, I was working for the Associated Press in Los Angeles, and I wound up covering the riots in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And when I ultimately moved from L.A. to Philadelphia, and I worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer and Fox at 10 o'clock news. Then I got a job with Dow Jones back in 1994. First thing the editor there said to me was, oh, I love your business clips, talking about my AP clips.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you really know how to tell great stories. And I was thinking, business clips? What business clips? What is he talking about? But all of my columns and the stuff that I had written on Peter Uberoff's effort to rebuild L.A., about the electronics industry that had been very badly damaged in the wake of looting and fires and the stuff that happened, after Rodney King and the whole riots that broke out in L.A. I was like, wait a minute, those are business stories, right? But at the time, I didn't see them as that. I just thought, I'm covering spot news. I'm telling people what happened
Right.
in this community, in this store, in this particular area. But they all had a business or financial component. But I really just didn't even perceive it as that at the time.
Well, LA riots seem like a lot heavier, serious news than doing some business reporting.
I know.
Depending who you're talking to.
Right. So when I started at Dow Jones, again, I had a great editor named Rick Stein, and he said, oh, you're such a great writer. I love how you tell these stories. And here, I want to put you on our most high-profile beat. I want you to cover Wall Street. And I was like, you do realize that I don't know a stock from a bond. I don't even know what. He's like, don't worry about that. You'll learn. You're going to teach that. You're fast on your feet. You're going to, So he was right.
Yeah, trial by fire.
Yep. And because I'm very curious and I love to do research and ask a lot of questions and I like to learn from people and talk to people, it came kind of quickly. But, obviously years and years and years, the years turned into decades now. And but so now on the other side, as a money coach and as a financial educator, I'm still learning every day. Like just before I hopped on with you, I interviewed two people for a cover story that I'm doing for AARP about folks who are baby boomers and retirees who have debt and various forms of debt, medical debt, student loan debt, credit card debt, mortgage debt, etc. And it was just the two people that I was talking to, I was like, this is so, their cases, their stories were so unique, but also so representative of how it is that older folks can wind up with a lot of, with debt. So, part of it, the part of the common ground is sort of recognizing that there's always an opportunity to learn, that you can ask that next question, and you can, once you think, oh, I'm the expert on this and I got this down, then that's when, life kind of gets cut off for you, because you're not learning, you're not growing, you just, in that realm where you just think, nobody can teach you anything, and that's kind of a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, and I think especially in the information age today, we have the resources and tools to be learning all the time, whether it's watching videos on YouTube or reading articles online or listening to podcasts. I mean, we can fill ourselves full of knowledge on all kinds of different subjects. And you're right, the minute you stop learning is, it's like, that's the day you're underground, I think.
That's right. And my husband, Earl, he often will say that to our two younger kids. They will say, Daddy, and ask a question. And he'll say, whip out that supercomputer in your pocket and get the answer. Tell them to take out their phone, because the information is right there at your fingertips. We have these very powerful, supercomputers basically right in our pockets or in our, and they're like, okay. He wants them to get used to the process of, finding out information, researching. And, what they have now is, and my son is 17, our little one is 11. We had to do it the hard way.
Right,
so like,
right. Dewey Decimal System.
Encyclopedia. Yeah, exactly. Go to the library, get through encyclopedias, Right. But of course, the internet came around, but you're absolutely right. And that's also, frankly, one of the exciting things about working in the industry right now, where we see this convergence of financial services and offerings, whether it's products, services, research, applications, et cetera, and technology, because the whole fintech category has just opened up so much opportunity to help people to learn in different ways, to expedite ways to save money, to save time, to do things easier, to put critical information at your fingertips. So it's really, to me, a really super exciting time to be part of the world of financial education and teaching people how to do better with their money.
Well, I think there's a huge opportunity there. I mean, sadly, these financial topics are not often taught in school. I look at the body of work that you have, your books, and it appears to me that all of them tackle very practical subjects. I know some of them are based upon your personal experience. Is that always the case, or does it depend?
Wow, that's another great question, Andy. The books that I write, I really try to tackle those, what I call bread and butter subjects that, the average person really needs help with. So, like, one of my books is called Your First Home, The Smart Way to Get It and Keep It. And I wrote that book in the wake of the foreclosure crisis and the mortgage meltdown, because I really wanted to talk to people about smart home ownership. And I am a proponent of home ownership, and I wanted to advocate that, but I also wanted to emphasize the need for responsible home ownership, sustainable home ownership. So I'm sure in the book, I told a couple of stories about my own experience becoming a homeowner and properties that I've owned and stuff like that. But the vast majority of it, frankly, was, lessons learned, very practical and tactical strategies for people to use other people's stories. So the short answer to your question is that I almost always try to tie in, if it's relevant or noteworthy, perhaps, my own personal story, because I think that actually helps people to remember information, to better identify and connect with the subject matter, and also perhaps to not feel so alone. Because, if we're honest, we've all made money mistakes or had setbacks or just personal issues or drama, whatever in our lives that also had financial implications. But too often people just kind of suffer in silence. They'll act like, oh, everything is peachy keen and rosy and I'm not going to say anything about it, knowing that they're really kind of being, stressed out about a financial problem, whether it's a divorce they're going through, a kid who's giving them problems and who's, making the family, finances or just stress in general. And people sometimes just don't want to talk about it, and that sort of taboo, oh, let's pretend it's not there type of attitude, it serves no one. So part of the reason why I tell my story and candid in saying the good things, the great things, the bad things, the ugly stuff, to the extent that I really can be, just open and honest about all that. Part of the reason I do that is so that other people will know they're not alone in going through some of those very same struggles or perhaps something related to it.
Yeah, that's very powerful. You are a television personality, a radio personality, an author. So all those things give you tremendous credibility. But at the end of the day, you're also a practitioner. You had $100,000 in personal debt and you were able to pay that down and free yourself from that debt burden. I think as a practitioner, that's probably the strongest credibility that you can have.
I agree with you. And frankly, that was just, you said in personal debt, that was just credit card debt. So that was just $100,000 on the credit card side.
Oh, I see.
That wasn't the mortgage. That wasn't the student loans, the $40,000 I had in student loans that I also paid off. But yes, you're right, to the extent that, I had to actually do this myself. But I don't discount other experts or other folks who are just as passionate and committed and helpful and informative to teach people about, let's say, getting out of debt or perhaps preventing it in the first place, even if they haven't had debt, even if they've never had, because I think there's great lessons to be learned. Like Erin, I think Erin Lowry, who, her site is Broke Millennial, and people just automatically assume, okay, so she's a broke millennial, but she's going to tell us how to fix it or what to do. Well, no, her story, if you know her story, her dad was like totally on her case, all the time growing up, but in a great way that she's extremely happy about and appreciative of. Right. So her message is more like, let me tell you how to not be a broke millennial, how to fix things, because she actually did a lot of things right thanks to her upbringing and her family values and the lessons that she learned along the way. And so, again, those powerful stories, whether it's what happened in your family or situations that you've been through, they can help people one way or the other. Even if you had positive, good experiences, you can show people sort of the pathway down which they can walk as well and sort of emulate your success or kind of, follow along. So I think it's all very helpful. As long as it comes from the right place of, just legitimately trying to help people. And there's space and room out there for all of us, frankly, to tell. Because not everybody's going to sort of flock to me or click with me or identify with me or whatever. And just, ditto for, the next expert or the next one down the road and so forth and so on. But I do think it's important for people of all backgrounds, of all socioeconomic status, and et cetera, to constantly be on the lookout to find ways that they can improve their personal finances, do better, and learn more, because stuff constantly changes.
Your career as the money coach has been so successful, and you've written, I'm trying to think now. You've written, I think, 12 finance books, 8 for adults, 4 for kids. You have like thousands of articles on personal finance. You've been on TV. You've been on Oprah Winfrey Show, Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, Good Morning America. I think that any show you name, it seems like you've been on there. So I'm curious, given such experiences, like how do you define success?
Well, the biggest success that I have in my life, and this is like hands down, it's not even a hard call for me. The biggest success in my life is the fact that I have a very, very happy, healthy marriage and 3 great kids. And, it's not to say that, we never have any arguments ever or there's never any problems or anything like that. But, I was previously married. I was married for 13 years. My ex-husband was a student during the time for the most part, most of those years. He was a student for 11 years out of a marriage. And I used to live in Philadelphia. He went to Penn, and that's where he got his master's and his PhD. But I know what it's like to have been in a bad marriage that didn't work out, that had financial problems and just all kind of other drama. And I know what it's also like now to be on the other side, to have a really happy, healthy, intact marriage and a great model to show my kids of two loving entrepreneurs who happen to work together in business and be best friends at the same time. So that is my greatest success. And I can't even think of anything that comes even a close second to that, honestly.
Well, again, Lynnette, you're a practitioner.
The other stuff is like, it's gravy. The other stuff is just a little extra. It's just gravy, But somebody asked me, when you were on Oprah, when you hit the New York Times bestsellers list, when you did, X, Y, or Z, six-figure deal, nothing, I would give it all back in a minute if it meant that my marriage or my relationship with my kids or their happiness was, threatened even in any way. It wouldn't, I could care less.
Mm-hmm. So family is number one.
It totally is for me.
Are we quoting the money coach as saying that the money is not that important?
The money, frankly, the money isn't that important. Now, I'm not one to say that money doesn't allow you the freedom, the flexibility, benefits in life to do certain things. And that's part of my brand and my messaging, because I teach people that you don't just achieve goals, for example, without knowing the associated price tag. So if you told me, I do want a happy marriage, well, you have to spend some time working on that marriage. You can't just neglect your wife or husband and just spend all this time being a workaholic and, not recognize the consequence or the cost of that. So ditto, if you said, I want to be able to start a foundation to help, XYZ people, great. Love that passion in your heart for that. But do you know starting a foundation costs X, I want to go to graduate school. I want to send my kids to college. I want to pay for my daughter's wedding. I want to, buy a house. I want to travel around the world. Practically any goal you can tell me, I'll, be able to tell you the price tag associated with it or a close, ballpark for it. And so I'm not one to suggest, money isn't important, it doesn't matter, and blah, blah, blah. I'm saying that if you don't have the other things in your life right, then the money is not going to make a damn bit of difference. It's going to be extremely meaningless. So my husband Earl always says, all the money in the world can't save you from yourself if your mind isn't right. So people who have these sort of distorted views of things and twisted ideas and, and I'm in my 40s. My husband is in his early 50s. And even as I age, I have a greater appreciation for things like health and the fact that, it's such a great equalizer. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't take care of your health, you can have the best money or the most money, that the best medicine you can possibly buy. But you know what? Cancer is an equal opportunity disease. And so,
absolutely right.
It's kind of like you have to put it all in perspective.
I love it. Family and health. And if I may be so bold to suggest a second or third or fourth, I think that one, you are helping so many people through your books and through your platform. And then the other thing is that after you were downsized and went through this transition to an entrepreneur, then you paid down your debt. So you no longer had the burden of $100,000 in credit card debt. You had freedom. So I think helping people in freedom, financial freedom.
Absolutely. Rank up there as well. And I'll tell you something else. I had a close friend of mine. She once asked me when she, saw my career really start elevating and just, some things visibly were a lot more successful. And she said, wow. She said, do you think there's any coincidence, like after you met Earl, and my husband is a book agent and my business manager and co-owner of the business, et cetera. She said, she said, your career, you really blew up after after you got with Earl. Do you think there's any coincidence? And I was like, heck no, there's no coincidence. That's like very integral to the whole, integral to my success here, I have a great partner.
It takes a team.
Totally. So, at many levels, everybody has their own definition of success. And you mentioned, of course, freedom. We have our own monetary definitions of that as well. Like our goals, one of our goals is to be in 6 to 7 more years at what we call work optional. So some people call it retirement. Okay. I'm not retiring because I love what I do, but certainly I am on track, and we're working towards being at a point where we don't have to work at all if we don't want to, and that's the goal. For some people, they'll say, "Oh, I want to have $1 million in the bank. I want to have $5 million. I want to have 50,000. I want to have whatever their number is." But it does behoove us all to sort of know, like, what do you need in life to be happy? I happen to be a person who I don't need much. I have a great home in a very, very nice neighborhood, but I have like the most modest home in the in the neighborhood. I have a old car, a 2002 Toyota Highlander. My husband has a 2003 Chevy Tahoe. So we're not, we're not like into things and stuff. We do value and prize education. So we save for our kids' college education. We know that, with one daughter in college, the oldest one, she's at the University of Texas at Austin. The 17-year-old son is coming next year right behind her at the college of his choice. Alexis, our 11-year-old, then she'll be off to college. And that's a priority. Our retirement years, again, what we call the work optional phase, we like to save aggressively for that. So that's a priority. Travel is very important to us. We think that travel enriches your mind, body, and soul. It's certainly rejuvenating for us as entrepreneurs because we work very, very, very hard, and then we like to go off and play hard. And really, for us, playing hard just mostly means chilling. Like, relax, don't do anything, But we travel a lot for business and pleasure. But just overall, in the scheme of things, you have to decide whether or not you're going to align your money with your values. Tell me what your values are, and then let me take a look at your checkbook, and I'll tell you whether or not you're spending, for example, in alignment with your values. Let me see your credit card statements. Let me see your, what you actually paid out money for, and then I'll tell you where your values, what's most important to you. So and again, for everybody, this is not a judgment. This is not like, oh, you must think like I think or do what I do. Absolutely not. Do what's important and relevant and meaningful for you, but do it consistently. Like, let the money follow what you say you really actually want to achieve. Some people say, oh, my kids, they're the most important things in my life to me, and blah, blah, blah. And then they never see their kids. They, they have such mommy and or daddy guilt that they just buy them things instead of spending quality time with them, or they, sort of abdicate responsibility and, a whole host of things. So
Amen to that.
If you're saying my kids are the most important things to me, it's kind of like the follow-up is like, oh, in what way? Oh, their education, their emotional happiness, their well-being, their safety. Okay, well, then maybe it's best not to let your, 4-year-old in preschool walk home 7 blocks from himself by himself. I'm using obviously a really exaggerated, example, but no. if you say, oh, my kids, their education, well, put up some money in a 529 plan, save something for college. Don't wait until they're 18 and then say, oh my God, I guess we got to take out student loans. So
I'm hearing it's all about priorities, setting the correct priorities, and then having a plan in place so that your actions back up those priorities.
Absolutely. Choices. I'll tell you this is a funny story. Well, sort of. And so I'll just be, generic in the description here, but very frank and honest and clear in terms of the messaging. I had a friend who is Indian, from India, not Native American, who once told me, who said, well, pretty much, I'm paraphrasing what this friend said. Well, you Americans, you guys say you value education, but really you don't. You'll spend money on clothes and on shoes and on vacations and on blah, 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 but you really don't. And I was like, huh? At first I was kind of like a little stunned. And then the friend proceeded to say, you see, in our culture, here's what we do. And just flat out laid it out and said, when we say we value education for our kids, when the kid is first born, we're going to start saving money for him or her. We're going to do this, that, and just walk through a whole bunch of things. And I was kind of like, I was left sitting there, face to face, and I was like, you're right. I was like, oh, wow, you're right. Like, you can't argue with, like results and action and like real life. Don't talk about it. Don't just yak, just be about it, And so I was like, now, of course, not all. And I didn't, the generalization was what kind of threw me off at first. But to a certain extent, the person was making the point that you have to have the actions in the deeds to follow up on the words. It can't just be, rhetoric if you're really going to be serious and talking about this in a meaningful way. So, and yeah.
I love that. And I think it goes a little bit back to when you were going to like middle school and high school, it's that diversity, getting different perspectives from different people and different cultures, because we all learn from each other.
Absolutely. That to me is really like in any organization, in a family, in communities, that's the value of diversity. You don't get this sort of groupthink, the one-sided sort of monotonous viewpoint that, may or may not be right, may or may not be optimal, may or may not be the only way to go about doing something. It's like, even in my marriage to Earl, who is also African American, I cannot tell you how many times he's taught me things where I was absolutely just 100% confident that I knew this and I was right. But then I was like, oh, wait, I never even thought about it that way. Yeah, I guess that is just as effective, just as right, So you have to be open-minded.
That's why a good partner makes us better. That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and your expertise. And it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. Can you tell the Inspired Money listeners where they can find you?
Sure. You can find me online at askthemoneycoach.com. That's my free financial advice site, as well as moneycoachuniversity.com. That's the online video-based platform we just launched in 2017 to teach people about money through videos. Awesome. So you don't have to just read or listen. You can also watch. Right. The social media stuff is the obvious, the Facebook, Twitter, everything is just at The Money Coach. So, The Money Coach. Yeah, and I'll have that in the show notes. Okay, good deal. Thank you, Lynnette. Thanks, Andy. Take care now. Okay, bye-bye. All right. All righty, bye-bye. Thanks for listening. What were your favorite Inspired Money moments? I love that Lynnette said that we've all made money mistakes or had setbacks that had financial implications. It's important not to suffer in silence. When there are financial troubles, people often don't want to talk about it, but know that you are not alone going through it. And then Lynnette said in general, the people who are most successful at whatever they do are naturally curious, people who have interest in other people and the world around them. Learning is just so important, whether you're 8 or 98. And finally, the biggest success in Lynnette's life is having a happy, healthy marriage and 3 great kids. She knows what it's like to be in a bad marriage that had financial problems and drama. Today, she and her husband, Earl, are 2 loving entrepreneurs who work together and are best friends. The other stuff is gravy. Being on Oprah, making the New York Times bestsellers list, she would give it all back in a minute if it meant her marriage or relationship with her kids were threatened in any way. While we all need money to pay for things that we need, ultimately, money is not that important. You have to put it into perspective, considering health, family, friends,
and what really makes you happy. For Lynnette and Earl, they treasure education and travel. Travel enriches her mind, body, and soul. Coming up next time on Inspired Money.
Changes I've made in my life. Well, I mean, I've made a lot of changes in my life. I mean, one thing I'm looking back on now and saying, well, I wasn't scared to take a few risks. I mean, I set out to be an actor. I had certain goals, if you like. I was fearful that I wouldn't achieve them, but I look back and by the age of 30, I'd actually hit and ticked a lot of the boxes that I'd wanted to achieve. You know, I had had a major TV show, I'd had a movie that had gone international, I was being invited to Hollywood and doing all of that. I'd done lead roles at the Royal Shakespeare Company, you know, I'd been on the West End, I'd actually done a lot. And then I had a crisis moment around about the age of 30 where I was like, well, is this really it?
That's Golden Globe nominated actor Linus Roach, currently filming season 7 of Homeland, where he plays David Wellington, the White House Chief of Staff. You won't want to miss this one. Thanks so much for listening. Before you go, I just want to thank everyone who's rated and reviewed this podcast on iTunes. If you haven't done so yet, please rate, review, and subscribe by going to inspiredmoney.fm/iTunes. Send me an email with your iTunes username, and I'll add you to a drawing to win cool prizes. For show notes and guest links, go to inspiredmoney.fm/006. Inspired Money is brought to you by my company, Runnymede Capital Management, a fiduciary advisor. We help individuals, families, and companies with their investments and retirement accounts. Educate yourself for free by subscribing to our blog at inspiredmoney.fm. All the music on today's show is by Jim Kimo West. Want to be an inspired moneymaker? Do something that scares you. Do something that's going to make you better. Do something to give back in a bigger way to the world. Tweet me and tell me what you're up to. Until next time, find your inspiration and run with it.